this, he used to say, Jacko, stick in there. We can make this organization strong. By God, with his help, we did. He not only gave support, he gave legal advice, incredibly valuable legal advice to help us get through a very bad time. In the process, Gordo became one of my best confidants and dearest friends. I would call him at 10 o'clock in the morning from Tampa, Florida, and it'd be 7 o'clock here, and he just got done with a run or whatever he was doing, and he said, I got a bagel and bacon, so let's talk. He has always been a strong and enthusiastic supporter of Phi Alpha Theta, has been for decades. He became the advisor of the California State University Fullerton's Theta Pi chapter in 1982 and continued in that capacity until today. He served as a member of our investment committee. When I took over, we had $13,000 in the treasury. With his help, we now have an endowment of $1.3 million. He also served faithfully on the Western History Association Dissertation Committee and was our chairman of our Nash Journal Award Committee. And this was for many years. And needless to say, he was a primary mover on all the committees he served on. A few years ago, Gordo established a Phi Alpha Theta Gordon Morris Bakken Scholarship in Western History. Cal State is following that. He spent more than 40 years at this fine institution. He was an outstanding professor who obviously touched many, many lives. Hundreds of graduate and undergraduate students. For many of you, I know he was a mentor, particularly for budding historians. For those of you who knew him, you are very, very fortunate. His presence at our biennial conventions will be truly missed. Gordon chaired how to do panels to help our faculty advisors and students. He did it on publishing books and articles, preparing student journals, and fundraising. He also volunteered at every one of the biennial conventions and usually sat at least 4 of the panels and always gave that extra little bit of advice, so all the students loved him. I have 5 graduate students who wanted me to pass on their best to the family because they met him and loved him too. Excuse me. Under Gordon's leadership, Phi Alpha Theta's chapter here won the Best Chapter Award for decades on end. His chapter raised the bar so high that we had to change the award and create a new one. That was because other chapters stopped filing because Cal State was always there. His student journal, the Well-Beaten, also won the prize so many times we had to do the same thing there. Its professional faculty and student efforts have made this a publication I think beat some of the National History Organization's publications. On the numerous occasions I have visited this fine campus, I have observed the admiration and respect that students have had for this memorable individual, but also many of his colleagues. My success as executive director of Phi Alpha Theta has largely been thanks to Graydon A. Bakken's efforts and guidance. My deepest sympathy to the Bakken family, and as Gordo said to me, he had a special saying for me, keep your powder dry. I never figured out what the hell that meant. Gordo, rest in peace, my dear friend. You fought the good fight.
I wanted to say welcome to all of you on behalf of myself and my brother and my daughters, Eric and Emily. We are really blessed to have all of you here today. I also want to try and give you a picture of Gordon Bakken as a dad, a grandfather, a community and church member. So Dad, I would say, was an involved father. I would say passionately involved in our activities, but he always looked for an opportunity to teach. When we were kids, toddlers, he played tickle bare feet with us, and he would sit in the middle of the family room, Indian style, and we had this sliding door that we could run and hide in. And Dad would kind of growl like a bear and wave his arms around. And the idea was you ran around with your bare feet until he could grab you and tickle you. You had red marks all over your stomach. When he was writing, I would play Barbies at his feet. My brother and I would come in, and he later told me he lost many great thoughts or puns to those questions. In 7th grade, I came home and I said, Dad, can you help me? I have to give an oral report in history class. And I picked fur trapping. And I said, would you help me? So I came home that day, and about like this high in 3 columns were the books. He said, yeah, once you get started on those, let me know, Ange. So for many years, he coached both my soccer team and my brother's soccer team. He coached me in softball. He coached Little League, as you saw, with Dave Vandevetter. He approached both those sports like he did teaching, with just a passion for learning. And he never played soccer himself, so he got books from the library and he watched pro soccer to learn. And we had a bumper sticker back in the 70s when, well, it's now back in style now, but that, bright neon green was popular, and it said, give blood, play soccer. When I was I think I was 8 or 9, I was playing softball, and Dad was warming us up before a game, and he liked to hit those high fly balls that bounced like grounders. And so sure enough, he was hitting those, and the one bounced and hit Lisa square on the forehead, and she went out cold. And while they tended to Lisa, Dad gathered the girls around. He said, now girls, what did Lisa do right? We said, Coach, she stopped the ball with her body. Exactly. And then to our dismay, he said, but what did Lisa do wrong? We had no answer. He said she passed out before she threw the ball home. And when they needed a team referee, my dad signed up. He ended up reffing soccer for over 30 years, and he would often stop the play, call the girls or boys over, explain what the rule was or what the foul was. He studied that handbook. He knew the changes from each year to the next. For several years, he was the JUSA referee coordinator before there was email. So he would spread worksheets out across the counter and be on the phone for hours at night. He then refereed my granddaughter's game. And finally, I said to him, Dad, you've missed more of Erica's soccer games because of conferences and reffing to get your quota. And I said, I think it's time to retire. So he did. For all you students out there, the stories Dad told about myself and my brother was probably a wee bit exaggerated. I don't think we scored that many goals or hit that many home runs, and definitely didn't take the shots from as far out as he said. But truth be told, one of my first goals, I did take out the goalie. That one was true. I would say we grew up like most kids did. When we'd go camping, Dad would tell us Indian torture stories. He would grab us by the head and scalp us. We would learn how the Indians would bury their captive up to the neck in sand, with their head tilted to the sun, then slit the eyelids so they would stay open. He said then the Indians would pour in honey over the face so that the ants would come and eat them alive. They said, good night. He also was known for telling his bedtime stories about grizzly bear and elephant hunting. And that's when we learned about the 2-finger method. Because the guides, when you're elephant hunting, uses 2 fingers to taste the elephant dung, so you could find out what the elephant had been eating. And he liked to also talk about Hugh Glass and Jedediah Smith, who were both mauled by a grizzly bear. And not too long ago, he was telling these stories over at our house, and he was demonstrating on Emily, who cried out, Grandpa, that hurt, you really bit my head. So, thing was, there was always a crapshoot when introducing my friends to my father. It was almost as if Dad could sense something about the person, the shock factor. And if it was there, he would get this twinkle in his eye and just go for broke. So one of our friends, he demonstrated at dinner how to artificially inseminate a cow, emphasizing that the glove had to go way up to the shoulder. I thought my friend's wife, Michelle, was going to lose her dinner listening. He liked to really more lecture my friends. Once, my very conservative Christian college roommates, we were with dinner, having dinner with them up at UC Santa Barbara, and he decided that time to talk about Leviticus, the Puritans, and bestiality. I think my roommate also was named Michelle, and color just kind of drained from her face. So maybe it's some shells he kind of targeted out. But he didn't just embarrass me with his friends, he actually made dating a bit challenging for me. And maybe you've already heard this story because it is true, but my colleague, now he's my colleague I guess, but we met and had a date when we were at Fullerton College. And Jeff Green, who is now married to Colleen Green, who works here, came to the door, and Mom and I knew the plan. We had to try and usher the men out as quickly as possible, or we'd never go on the date. But Dad, for some reason that night, turned around and went down the hallway very quickly. But Mom and I weren't fast enough, and Dad came back out with his rifle. Jeff basically came out of his cowboy boots, but the thing was he was wearing a National Rifle Association belt buckle, and Dad had just bought a new scope. He thought Jeff should see that. So then he took them back into the den and proceeded to explain all the guns to him. So Dad wasn't just passionately involved in our endeavors as children, but he also, I think, had his own eccentric flair. He had Argyle socks he wore proudly in the 80s. Of course, all the Western-style dress shirts you saw, his cowboy hats, his crack cheese head and kiss stamps. One year he bought a Darth Vader mask, so he said he could breathe heavily to the students while he passed back their exams. He even bought a special coin that I haven't been able to locate, but it was used for the coin tosses in soccer, and it had some historical significance, so he could explain that first. And I don't know if any of you saw his dance moves, but they had also an eccentric flair. And at Maureen Woodard's wedding, he got so excited about dancing and started sweating that he took his tie off and tied it around his head and wore it kind of to the side. But then when we were probably in junior high school, Dad thought maybe it would be his job to single-handedly recirculate the $2 bill and paid everything with $2 bills. And then went on to do this with silver dollar coins. So this was back when some waitresses wore their money belt around their waist. So you can imagine when he left 4 stacks of silver coins. And then in the 80s, he became very engrossed in pop music. One of his favorite bands was INXS. But he also liked to listen to Madonna, Bruce Springsteen, Billy Joel. And then he started writing references into his exams. So he taught for a while at the real estate law class in the finance department. And he got all excited and said, Ange, listen to this one. So Madonna owned a home, and she subletted it to Bruce Springsteen and Billy Joel. But then the house burned down, and Billy Joel said, we didn't start the fire. So in addition to hunting, Dad loved playing bridge and euchre. And we used to play euchre at home, and he could go alone on nearly nothing. When the hand was done, I just thought, I didn't know how he did that. And he liked to speak German while he was playing. And he would slam his fist on the table when he made Trump. He played bridge up at the Huntington Library. And as Jochen spoke, his other hobby, or I think passion, was his church. He attended a men's Bible study every Thursday morning for probably 40 years. And he always took copious notes and bought his Bible. And when he ran out of room, he just bought a new one. He served on the elder board at Redeemer. He was a liturgist, usher, and he taught our confirmation classes. He was very active at First Lutheran in Fullerton for the past 15 years, also in a Bible study, working with the homeless ministry and ushering. And then one summer, Dad and I went through the entire book of Job together. He always would pray with us kids, and he liked to collect many things. Stamps and coins, belt buckles and guns were just a few. As an adult, my dad and I had a very close relationship. He came for dinner every week to see the girls and I, and our deal was if he brought a bottle of red wine, then I would cook. And on some nights when it was really stressful, I just shook my head and said, Dad, we have to go out. And he said, okay. We would share all of our accomplishments of the week. I would learn about what book was being finished or the conference presentation or what student had come by. But one afternoon, he was particularly excited. He explained that his claim in military history had finally been vindicated. Dad would begin that class holding up tampons and maxi pads. And on this particular day, a student had raised his hand, and he was a former Army medic. And he explained that that was exactly what he did, was he carried 15 tampons to plug the bullet wounds and several maxi pads to patch up the large wounds in the middle section. So Dad was super excited. He was not very effusive about his emotions, but he was always present and a great listener. He spent a lot of time listening to me talk about work, my administrative decisions when I served as department chair at Fullerton College, and of course we always shared issues about students and pedagogy. He also listened to my woes about being a single parent and the challenges of raising two girls, and very many occasions I felt very overwhelmed, and he said, Ange, this too shall pass. He would always give us a hug. He was very affectionate. Dad was also very consistent. We got the same Christmas gifts every year. I got little collectibles, and my daughters got stocks and coins. And every conference he went to, he would mail us all postcards. He paid his bills on time using his special fountain pen, and he was very generous with both his time and his money. But I think the side many of you may not have seen was one that I only saw a couple of times. When my daughter, Erica Lynn, my oldest, was born, he showed up every day for about 2 weeks just to hold his baby. And after that, he came on a regular basis ever since. He loved holding those girls and playing with them. And as they got older, Dad would engage them in more deeper stories and interrogate them with questions about school. But I only saw my dad cry twice, and that was both in incidents relative to my brother's accident and the death of Tempe Graves. But I always saw him get very choked up and have his eyes well with tears every time he talked about the men and women in our military service. And Dad would share all the stories of his military students, but anytime he saw a man or woman in uniform at a conference or at the bar across the street, he would buy them their drinks. That is the man that I will cherish and that I miss and I love very dearly. And Matt Bustos is going to share with us next. He is one of my father's former graduate students.
Thank you very much. Before we get started, one of the things that Dr. Bakken helped me and a lot of his graduate students with was public speaking. And one of the things he would do is he would always try and trip us up somehow. So if something falls or if there's a fire alarm that goes off, that's just Dr. Bakken trying to mess me up one last time. I want to thank the organizers of the service for giving me the chance to speak today. Dr. Bakken had so many students, and to be up here representing all of them is truly one of the greatest honors of my life, and I will cherish this forever. I can't begin to express how truly saddened I am regarding Gordon's passing. Those who never met him truly missed out on interacting with an extraordinary person. Those luckier still that took classes with him and watched a truly masterful educator impart knowledge on eager minds with a zeal not easily matched. And the luckiest among us, who got to know him on a personal basis, will always cherish the kindness, wisdom, and encouragement he bestowed upon us. The whole reason I came to Cal State Fullerton was because of Dr. Bakken. I studied at Cal State San Bernardino under one of his former students, Dr. Tom Long. And when I asked Dr. Long, what should I do? Should I go to grad school? What should I do? He said, the only application you need to file is at Cal State Fullerton. And you need to work with the world-class historian that I studied under. The opportunity to learn under Dr. Bakken is one that I will share with everybody forever. And hundreds and hundreds of students that have worked under him are truly blessed to have met and worked with such a kind and generous man. In the past month or so, I've heard dozens of Bakken stories. And he's impacted hundreds, if not thousands, of lives that could surely fill an arena 10 times this size. My Bakken story, however, in my opinion, is the epitome of who he was as a teacher and why he was a truly great person. I had just finished an internship at the College Football Hall of Fame in South Bend, Indiana, and I had discovered what I wanted to do for my master's thesis. I wanted to write something on Byron Whizzer White, who was a football player at the University of Colorado, nearly won the Heisman Trophy, and ended up as an ensign in the Navy during World War II, and served over 30 years on the Supreme Court. I went into Gordon's office and told him what I wanted to do, and immediately, having no prior knowledge of what I had chosen, rattled off five different things that I could take it, just off the top of his head, just automatically. We spent about 30 to 45 minutes talking, which, when you talk to Dr. Bakken, it always felt just like 5 minutes. It always felt like the time just slipped through your hands, and it was never enough. And he looked up at the ceiling, and he said to me, "Wow, I'm going to be part of a Byron Whizzer White project." The most amazing thing was that he was just as enthusiastic about the project as I was. And that's the epitome of who he was as a professor. He took so much joy in what his students did, both graduate and undergraduate, and he would always check in with us and see where we were at and always pester us to make sure that we were making the right progress and make sure we were doing all the right things. That's the kind of teacher Dr. Bakken was. He had an endless supply of enthusiasm. Even after his diagnosis, when no one would have faulted him for taking a step back, he stayed on my committee when he didn't have to. He turned into the scholar, teacher, and person that we should all strive to be. When people die of awful diseases like this, others often frame it as, quote, losing the battle. But the winning and losing is not tied to survival. Dr. Bakken faced his illness with the same zeal and determination he approached everything in life with. In this way, Dr. Bakken did not lose his battle. He never wavered, never faltered, never let it get the better of him. He continued to live his life as best he could and showed his family, colleagues, and students that no matter what, giving in is never acceptable. Upon the death of Teddy Roosevelt, a journalist penned a sentiment regarding TR that perfectly summed up Dr. Bakken's attitude in the face of his diagnosis. Death had to come for him in his sleep, because had he been awake, there would have been a fight. Dr. Bakken truly packed more living into one lifetime than most of us could hope for in 5 or 10. Even near the end, he held on because of the love he had for living and for his family. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank his family for sharing him with us. There are so many people that he's touched and so many lives that he's altered. And being a professor is not by any means an easy job, and it takes so much time and effort and love. And we, as Cal State Fullerton, I'm speaking as the entire department, we can't help but thank you so much for allowing him to do what he did and do what he loved. And we truly loved every class that we had with him, every discussion that we would have. It was just, I can't put into words how truly lucky I am and how lucky all of us as students are that we got to study under him. When people ask me to describe Dr. Bakken, I'm always at a loss for words. I always answer that if anyone wrote a book chronicling the life of Dr. Bakken and attempted to pass it off as fiction, no publisher would touch it. How could you possibly believe that somebody like this actually existed? Someone as intelligent, smart, and caring as this man. Surely an individual of this sort never existed. But he did exist, and the lives of countless students, faculty, and everybody he came into contact with are changed forever. Such a person did in fact exist, and everyone in this room is better for it. I'll always cherish every moment with him. He changed my life in ways I could not imagine. And so, in the words of Roy Rogers and Dale Evans, happy trails to you until we meet again.
I'll just say one brief moment. If anyone wants to come up and share your memories of Gordon Bakken, please do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I knew Professor Bakken. I recognized so many faces out there from our classes for all those years. I knew the professor from 2010. I took summer class, and then I was here as a grad student for history and graduated my master's in history a couple years ago. How can I describe him? There's so many people who've come up here and talked about him. I guess the best way, and I've been sitting here thinking about it, is the first class I ever took with him and our relationship after that. My first contact with him was an email that he sent saying, "We're going to meet at the Marriott." I thought, that is really weird. I thought to myself, what kind of class is this? So I thought, I'm not majoring in like restaurant management or something, but okay. So I go and I do my first assignment. By the way, I'm Wesley Willison, I didn't mention, but I did my first assignment for him, and I got it back the next week. I thought, oh, I did a great job. He had a toilet stamp. He circled the whole paper and wrote crap and pointed it down the toilet. I went home and I was so upset. I cannot possibly tell you how upset I was. I thought, that guy, that cowboy hat, he did that. and I thought to myself, okay, so I go and talk to him the next week, and he said, and just like Dr. Bakken always did, he put his hand on my shoulder. He said, "Well, Wes," he said, "all you got to do is," he said, "you know, just make sure that you improve your reading and your writing skills, and you know, of course, I have these books here that you can look at." I was like, "It's fine. We already have 20 books." He said, "Well, you know, go ahead and email me your papers a few days before, and I'll look over them and grade them, and then I'll let you know and get back with you." So it was a wonderful class. It was History of California. And I can't possibly tell you what he meant in my life. I ended up taking 5 classes with him. And if I could count, there's only 3 people in my life that have ever made a big difference, and he is one of those 3. And I wrote him, I would see him even after he served on my thesis committee. And boy, did he work hard up with me on that. One of his big things, if he's standing here right now, he'd have a good laugh about this. "Wes, you never put those commas in the right place on the footnotes." Oh, well, anyway, when I got done with my thesis, I finally learned how to put in those commas. And yeah, we worked hard on that. We worked long on that. And so moving forward, I teach 6th grade. And I was telling my students when I found it after Professor passed away, excuse me, I told them, I said, there's only so many people that make a difference in your life. And I said to them that, I printed up the article from the Orange County newspaper and I made them read it. And they said something very telling to me. They said, "Thank God for teachers like him." And I agree. And the thing is that he made such a big difference in my life. And we kept in contact over the last couple of years, even though I wasn't in a class with him. I actually sent him a letter a few weeks before he passed away, telling him just what a difference that he made in my life. And I go out and I do the same for my kids because of him. And so many of us, and I see so many eyes out here, and so many people, and all of you are different corners of the world. To honor him, we go out and make a difference. And I'm teaching my kids, my 6th graders, how to do Chicago to Arabian. So thank you very much.
That's interesting. I told my students and had them read the same article from the Orange County Register regarding it was the fall of 1969. It was the height of the Vietnam War, and a 20-year-old undergraduate student decided to take this constitutional history class. And it was from this new professor who was 26 years old, And I figured this was going to be an interesting class, and as I walked in, there was an outline on both sides of the board. There were 8 books to read. I've never seen a professor be able to thin out a class as quickly as I've known Gordon for many, many years. He was at my wedding. I've been involved with him with the Los Angeles Westerners. He was my academic mentor. Many of the things said here I could reiterate, but I don't really need to. And I don't really think knowing him for a great long period of time is necessary. Anyone who has met Gordon knows that his sense of enthusiasm, his generosity in his knowledge, his ability really, more than anything I can think of, is a sense that he was unassuming in his tremendous ability to offer of himself to students, to fellow academics. You know, this month we are celebrating Martin Luther King's birthday. On the night before he passed away, he said, longevity has its place, but he said all he wanted to do was God's will. And I really believe that as an academic, if we try to pursue truth, then the voluminous number of books that he put out, his energies as a teacher, certainly reflect the fact that he did do God's will. And I think we can salute Gordon in all that he's done in his career.
My name is Dan Stackhouse, and when I heard that Dr. Bakken had passed away, I had to come here today because I had to let everybody know what he did for me. I was a student of his from 4 or 5 times, from 1987 to 1995. Spring, I guess it was spring of '88, I was an undeclared student, and I took his History 180 class. And not that many books, interestingly enough. I think there were only 3. Maybe he was having an off semester. But I learned more about history. I learned to think about history in terms of why things happened and what the effect was. And I just got I had always enjoyed history, but I'd never seen it taught or presented in this way. And I was hooked. I became a history major. And as I said, I took him 4 times, and one of the classes, I'm so proud I still have this, I took his American Legal History class, and I have a pen here that he did this one. And I can prove that I survived the legal history course at Cal State Fullerton with Professor Gordon Morris Bakken. But it doesn't end there, because when I was getting my master's here, he was one of my advisors, along with Dr. Krebs, and he wrote me a letter of recommendation when I applied to Claremont to work on my doctorate. He offered me many, many opportunities to get published. I couldn't take him up on all of them. I took him up on some of them because I was working on my own dissertation. He said, no, Dan, you get that dissertation to committee. That's good. But I never had a chance to really say to him, and thank him for everything he did. So that's why I'm here today. Thank you.
I'm Daniel Schwabi. I was a grad student back in '09, and I had to get a thesis written. And I'd argued with professors before about theses, once for 6 out of 10 weeks in undergraduate. And between the walk from the classroom to his office, he threw out an idea, and he said, and he didn't tell me exactly how many volumes there were to read of the Strategic Bombing Survey, but it was 110, it turns out, and he didn't have any. And I took it. I said, that's the kind of thing that I want. We're on board with the same idea. And so I wrote, and he left me alone. And when I brought it in to defend it, one of my advisors went, you wrote a book, didn't you? And I said, yes. Where do I get it published? And to his credit, as I threw it out there, I asked him, and he sent an email to someone he knew. And she contacted me, and they signed a contract with me, and I wrote a book, and I got my master's thesis published. And so I was ended up with the University of Nebraska Press, and I did a lot of work with them over the next few years, and it came out on the 1st of January, and so I got a box of books, and I pulled one out, and I said, I gotta get a copy of this to the people that matter. And that's when I pulled out the website to get the address, and instead of an address, I got a notice that he had passed away. And so, you know, when people have asked, I'm like, oh, you wrote a book and this and that, and I always point out, yeah, but, you know, I may have written it, but it wouldn't be in this form if it wasn't for Dr. Bakken. He threw out, you know, the idea to what to write about. He threw out the opportunity to get it published. You know, and he had enough cachet out there that people listened to him, and they came to me and they gave me a chance. And so, you know, the first person I think in there is him, and the first person, you know, when anyone asks or they ask me to talk about it is him. And I don't think I'm alone in this sense, but I owe a lot to him, and I give him a lot of thanks for what he did for me, because, you know, I got a book published, you know, as a graduate student because of him. You know, and so it wasn't just the 24 that he wrote on his own, the stuff that he gave people to add into his books. He helped the other people get published, and that means a lot to me, you know, because I have a lot of pride in it, you know, and it's because of him. So, thank you, sir.
My name is Darren DeMaestri. I started college late in life. I just graduated not too long ago, actually. And my sister, who finished even later than I did, she gave me some advice. She said, if you're going to take a class at a college, you should go meet your professor beforehand. Go introduce yourself. So there I was, Dr. Bakken. Turns around with a big grin. Come on in. Introduce myself, gets up, shakes my hand. Have a seat. Have a seat. And we start chatting. I never felt more comfortable with someone of authority. Warm and inviting. Sat down, we chatted like we were old friends. I asked him, sir, I need to sign into your class. I understand your class is overfilled right now. He said, you know what, don't worry about it. You're on the list. In fact, you know, I guess he did a lottery for the overflow students. You get to choose. You get to reach your hand in the bag and pull out the name. I'm in. And I have a position of authority as well. So, going to the classroom, as I was leaving, he says, don't give my secret away. I'm like, no, sir. I walk into the classroom. I was there early. He showed up about 15 minutes later. One of his graduate students was there. I don't know. Well, he had him before.